On the day my physical therapist husband, Ethan, got promoted, I received a photo from a coworker. In the therapy room, Ethan was holding his ex-girlfriend's waist. They were staring into each other's eyes, and he was leaning over her, pinning her down on the table. I printed that photo out and placed it on the nightstand. Late that night, Ethan came home smelling of sweet orange blossom cologne. He froze when he saw the photo on the nightstand, but quickly recovered and started explaining. Avery, you know this is just my job. The area where she feels pain is very sensitive. I had to find the exact angle to apply pressure. This photo is just a bad camera angle. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself. Okay, go to sleep. You still have to do her pelvic alignment therapy tomorrow. He looked surprised. You don't mind? I shook my head. He just couldn't let go of his first love. It was fine. I happened to have one of my own, too. Seeing that I had nothing more to say, Ethan went to take a shower. The posture in that photo didn't look like physical therapy at all. It looked like an embrace. The photo was sent to me by Mia, a nurse in the physical therapy department. We had interned at the hospital together. She had only attached one sentence. Avery, I'm not trying to stir up drama, but Dr. Ethan has been doing this every single day for the past 6 months. After his shower, Ethan walked over, sat on the edge of the bed, and reached out to ruffle my hair. Avery, Chloe's lower back injury is serious. Ordinary physical therapy doesn't work for her. I have to get close to find the right trigger points. I was just treating a patient. I turned my head to avoid his hand and stared at the ceiling. I know. She's a prima ballerina. Her rehearsals have been intense lately, and her lower back muscles are spasming again. I don't trust any other therapist to handle it. I know. You know my skills. I'm the best in the department. I finally turned my head and offered a faint smile. I know, Dr. Ethan. You're a saint. He continued to justify himself. She and I broke up a long time ago. We're just regular friends now. I didn't reply. I knew exactly how deep their history ran. Since Chloe returned to the country 2 years ago, she had never truly left his life. She strained a muscle during rehearsal, her old injuries flared up. She couldn't sleep and needed him to come over for a massage. On the night we went to the courthouse to sign our marriage license, she sent a Snapchat at 11 p.m. My back is locked up again. I can't move. It hurts so bad. Ethan had just taken off his coat. After reading the message, he didn't say a word and tied his sneakers back on. I stopped him. Does it have to be tonight? She's alone in her apartment. No one is there to take care of her. I sat on the edge of the bed and lowered my head. He leaned down and tucked the blanket around me. I'll be back soon. I'll take you to get our courthouse wedding photos tomorrow morning. He didn't return until 3 in the morning. There was a trace of orange blossom massage oil on his collar. He explained that it rubbed off while massaging her. I didn't throw a tantrum. I didn't argue. I just remembered the date. Every time Chloe was brought up, he would always say, "She's my patient. It's my job." The more fragile she acted, the more patient he became. The more demanding she was, the harder it was for him to say no. Everyone said they had never truly broken up. I, his legal wife, felt like a mere prop in their love story. Ethan wanted to say something more, but his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression changing slightly, and silenced it. It's probably her. She gets anxious before big shows. I close my eyes. Answer it. In case she can't sleep again tonight and ruins her rehearsal tomorrow. He didn't answer. He placed his phone face down on the nightstand, turned around, and pulled me into his arms. Don't overthink it, babe. She and I are ancient history. I didn't hug him back. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my lower abdomen, as if someone had pinched me from the inside. I frowned, but didn't say a word. Even if I told him, he wouldn't care right now anyway. At 6:30 the next morning, Chloe's call came in right on time. Ethan, I can't do the rehearsal. I seriously can't even lift my back. Ethan's voice carried a hint of helpless indulgence. Chloe, you've been dancing ballet for over a decade. You're not a rookie. Chloe whimpered over the line. Would it kill you to comfort me a little? He was silent for 2 seconds, his tone softening.
Fine.
I'll head over after my morning rounds. I'll put a pain patch on you first. Chloe immediately pushed further. After that, you have to buy me breakfast and help me stretch my legs. Ethan let out a low chuckle. Maybe I should just apply to be your dance company's full-time doctor. Oh, I wish. Do you dare? Will your wife mind, though? The bathroom door was ajar, and I heard every single word. He hung up, turned around, and froze when he saw me standing there. She's just really stressed before the show. My face was expressionless. You really take great care of her. Maybe you should apply for that full-time gig. He frowned. Avery, Another wave of sharp pain shot up from deep inside my abdomen. I grabbed the doorframe, my voice hoarse. Move. I rushed into the bathroom, kneeling by the toilet and dry heaving. Nothing came up, but cold sweat kept pouring down my face. Ethan stood at the door. He didn't come closer, only frowning. Did you skip dinner again last night? I gasped for air. My stomach, it hurts. He took one look at my pale face and spoke in a cold, detached tone. Lower back strain can compress the sciatic nerve, causing referred pain in the abdomen. It's normal. You've been staying up late editing videos lately. Your posture is terrible. That's why you're hurting. I froze, my fingers gripping the edge of the sink tightly. It's not my back. He acted like he didn't hear me. He grabbed a tissue and wiped the doorknob. You never say anything when you're uncomfortable. You only play the victim when the pain becomes unbearable. It's exhausting, Avery. He glanced down at his watch. I have to do Chloe's physical therapy this morning, and I have a consultation this afternoon. I can't stay. There are painkillers in the medicine cabinet. Take 2. He paused before adding, make sure to turn on the exhaust fan when you're done. Don't leave a smell for others. The moment the door slammed shut, another wave of intense pain hit me. I couldn't even stand straight. A metallic taste rose in my throat. I leaned against the wall for a long time, suddenly feeling a deep sense of irony. He had all the patience in the world to find the perfect angle for every inch of Chloe's spine, but he found my pain exhausting and unseemly. So his medical ethics were reserved only for certain people. He grabbed his bag and left without looking back. I wiped my face, ordered an Uber by myself, and went to the hospital. When the doctor handed me the ultrasound report, her face was grave. The embryo is implanted very low, right near your previous scar. Continuing this pregnancy carries a massive risk. I stared at the blurry shadow on the screen, unable to speak for a long time. The doctor's tone softened. In this situation, it's best to make a decision with a family member. Should we contact your husband? I opened my mouth, only to realize that the only name I could call was Ethan. My parents had passed away early. When I finally got married to Ethan, I thought I finally had a family. But now, when the doctor asked for family, I was holding the paper with freezing fingers. Leaving the clinic, I stood on the steps and called Ethan. No answer. I sent him a text. I have an emergency. Come home now. I took a cab back. When I walked in, a pair of pink ballet flats was kicked off at the entryway. In the living room, Chloe was curled up on our sofa, one leg resting on the coffee table, her ankle wrapped in an elastic bandage. Ethan was kneeling in front of her, his fingers gently tracing her foot, massaging it with professional care. Did you twist it again during rehearsal? He asked. I didn't land cleanly, Chloe said, frowning, her voice dropping into a soft whine. Ethan, am I going to be out for another 2 weeks? The fascia is tight. Don't rush back to the stage. He pinched her ankle. Does this hurt? Yes, Chloe whispered, her eyes curved as she looked at him. But it doesn't hurt when you're here. I'm here, he said. Those 2 words. Since we got married, I had almost never heard him say them to me. Another wave of pain hit my abdomen. I gripped the entryway cabinet, my knuckles turning white. Only then did Ethan look up and see me. Where have you been? You look pale. I opened my mouth to say, I went to the hospital, but Chloe spoke first with a sigh. Avery, please don't misunderstand. My ankle was so swollen I couldn't walk. Ethan was worried about me taking an Uber alone, so he brought me here to treat it. I didn't look at her. I only looked at Ethan. I need to talk to you. Before he could answer, Chloe suddenly let out a sharp gasp. Ethan, my toes are going numb. He immediately looked down to check her ankle joint again, his voice softening even more. Don't move. The ligament is still loose. Give it a minute. I stood there, clutching my purse strap. I tried again. Ethan, can you please take me to the hospital? Chloe grabbed his wrist at that exact moment. Did I break a bone? Why is it hurting more and more? Ethan frowned as he examined her foot, not even looking up. Avery, if you're not feeling well, go lie down for a bit. I'll come check on you once I'm done here. No need. I turned and walked back to the bedroom, shoving the ultrasound report into the very bottom drawer of my vanity. That night, Ethan knocked on my door. The guest room is too damp. Let Chloe sleep in our bed tonight. You can crash in the guest room for one night. I opened the door. Chloe had already walked into our master bedroom with a glass of warm water. She sat directly on the edge of my bed, reaching into the nightstand drawer to look for pain patches. The very bottom drawer held my ultrasound report. I pressed my hand against the drawer. Don't touch that. I'll get it for you. But Chloe's fingers had already brushed against something else in another compartment. A box of unopened birth control pills. She raised an eyebrow and smiled. You guys have been married for so long and you're still using these? She shot Ethan a meaningful look. Didn't you used to hate these? You always said you never wanted kids in this lifetime. Ethan's face shifted. That's enough. Did I say something wrong? Chloe's smile didn't fade. You said it yourself. If you ever have a child, it would only be with me. The room fell dead silent. I looked at Ethan. He avoided my gaze. So, all these years, he wasn't being considerate by not pressuring me to have kids. He had already made the decision for me. My abdomen seized with another sharp pain. Clutching the edge of the cabinet, cold sweat beaded on my forehead. I pulled the ultrasound report out from the drawer and walked toward the door. Avery, where are you going? He called out from behind. I didn't look back. Where else could I go? To take care of a child he never planned to have and never deserved to know about. By the time I reached the hospital, I couldn't even stand straight from the pain. The ER doctor looked at my ultrasound and blood test results, her face darkening. There's a high probability of an ectopic pregnancy rupture. You could bleed out at any moment. We need to admit you immediately and prepare for emergency surgery. I leaned against the chair in the examination room, my back soaked in cold sweat. Where is your family? The doctor asked. This kind of surgery requires emergency consent and someone to stay with you. I was silent for a long time. Finally, I dialed Ethan's number. It rang for a long time before he picked up. In the background, I could hear Chloe's whiny, tearful voice. Ethan, my foot is swelling up again. Come look at it. Ethan's voice instantly softened. Don't move, babe. I'm coming. I spoke into the receiver. Ethan, come to the medical center. His voice grew cold. If you're really not feeling well, just let the doctors handle it. What good is me going there? The doctor said I need next of kin to sign the consent form. My voice was so quiet I could barely hear myself. I don't have any other family. I can only call you. The other end went silent for 2 seconds. Then, a frustrated sigh came through the speaker. Avery, stop doing this. I know you're an orphan and grew up in a foster home, and I get that you have abandonment issues. But you can't use that to guilt-trip me every single time. Those words felt like a needle stabbing straight into my eardrum. I doubled over in pain, my vision going black. The call was disconnected. I stared at the dark screen, my legs giving out. He knew exactly how alone I was in this world, yet he used that very vulnerability as an excuse to push me away. I braced myself against the wall, stood up, and scrolled through my contacts to a number I hadn't dialed in years. He picked up on the first ring. Avery? My voice trembled with pain. Can you come to the hospital? There was a brief silence, followed by the sound of a chair scraping back. Text me the address. I'm on my way. That evening, Ethan took Chloe to a college reunion party. After a few rounds of drinks, someone started a game of truth or dare, and the bottle spun and pointed at Ethan. Ethan, be honest. If Chloe hadn't gone abroad back then, would you two have been married by now? The room went quiet for a second, followed by a chorus of suggestive laughter. Chloe leaned against his side, lowering her head with a smile. Stop teasing, guys. Ethan's been married for 3 years. Despite her words, her hand slid over his. Ethan didn't pull away. Someone yelled, You're holding hands and telling us to stop teasing? Answer the question, Dr. Ethan. He raised his glass. Next question. The laughter grew louder. Chloe took his phone, wanting to take a selfie. Her finger paused over the passcode screen. It was still her birthday. You never changed the passcode, she whispered, her eyes curving as she leaned against his shoulder for a photo. My back is still stiff. Block the angle for me. Ethan frowned slightly, but still turned his body to block the camera light for her. Someone asked if they could post the picture on Instagram. He said casually, Go ahead. My wife doesn't check my social media anyway. He paused, then added, She's been in a weird mood lately, always complaining about not feeling well. The laughter slowly died down. A female colleague in the corner, Sarah, suddenly looked up. Are you saying Avery is faking it? Obviously. Sarah's expression changed. But yesterday I was at the medical center, and I saw Avery being rushed into the ER. A man was supporting her. The doctor said it was an ectopic pregnancy rupture. She was hemorrhaging. The guy who signed the consent form wasn't you. The laughter in the private dining room died, as if someone had cut the power. Sarah held her phone, her thumb resting on the screen, her eyes fixed entirely on Ethan. Beside him, Chloe's hand was still wrapped around his wrist, her head tilted at an angle that had, just seconds ago, looked demure and intimate. Now. Her grip loosened slightly, her manicured nails digging into his sleeve. What did you just say? Ethan's voice was flat, devoid of any inflection. He didn't move. He sat pinned to his chair, his glass of red wine halfway to his
Mouth.
I said, I saw Avery at the medical center yesterday, Sarah repeated, her voice cutting cleanly through the ambient noise of the restaurant. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She was in the emergency wing. A doctor was running beside her gurney, calling for blood products. An ectopic pregnancy. Rupture. She was bleeding internally, Ethan. Massive hemorrhaging. Ethan chuckled, a short, dry sound that rattled in his chest. That's
Impossible.
Avery isn't pregnant. She takes birth control. She was just complaining about stomach cramps this morning because of her posture. She always overreacts when she feels neglected. She wasn't overreacting when her blood pressure dropped to 70/40. Sarah said coldly. She flipped her phone around, showing a quick, candid photo she had snapped in the hallway. Avery, ghost white, strapped to a gurney, her lips pale, and 4-bag slung over her head. Next to the gurney stood a tall man in a dark charcoal coat, leaning over her, holding her limp hand while furiously signing a clipboard held out by a head nurse. Ethan stared at the screen. The room felt suddenly claustrophobic.
The bright
golden light of the chandelier seemed to burn his eyes. Who was that? Chloe asked, her voice high and fluttering, trying to break the tension. Ethan, it's probably just a misunderstanding. You know how hospital mix-ups happen. Besides, if she was really that sick, why wouldn't she call you? She did call him, Sarah snapped, looking directly at Chloe with unfiltered
disgust.
I was standing near the triage desk when the nurse handed her the
Phone.
I heard her ask him to come. And, do you know what he said? He told her to stop playing the orphan card. A collective murmur rippled through the table. Several colleagues from the physical therapy department lowered their gaze, suddenly feeling unclean just sitting in the same room. Ethan's phone was still lying face down on the tablecloth. He reached for it, with fingers that had suddenly lost all their dexterity. His hand trembled so violently, he almost knocked over his wine glass. He flipped the phone over. Missed calls, 0. Because he had blocked her notifications earlier, so she wouldn't interrupt Chloe's pre-show rehearsal discussions. He unlocked the screen. The last text message from Avery stared back at him. I have an emergency.
Come home now.
Sent 6 hours ago. Ethan? Chloe reached for his arm again, her tone soft, cajoling. Ethan, don't let her ruin tonight. You just got promoted. It's your celebration.
She's
probably fine now. If it was really serious, the hospital would have. Ethan stood up so fast his heavy dining chair fell backward, slamming against the polished hardwood floor with a deafening thud. He didn't look at Chloe.
He
didn't look at anyone. He grabbed his coat, his keys, and sprinted out of the room, leaving the door swinging wildly in his wake. Ethan, Chloe called out, her voice sharp with sudden panic, but he was already gone down the carpeted hallway. The smell of antiseptic in the medical center's surgical intensive care unit was thick and suffocating. Ethan sprinted through the automatic sliding glass doors, his wet shoes squeaking loudly on the pristine linoleum. His tie was loosened, his coat unbuttoned, his hair disheveled from the rain pouring outside. Avery Miller, he panted, slamming his palms down on the reception counter. I'm looking for Avery Miller. I'm her husband, Dr. Ethan Vance. The duty nurse looked up from her computer screen, her expression unreadable. She glanced at his ID badge hanging loosely from his pocket. Head of physical therapy, district hospital. Dr. Vance, she said, her voice cool and strictly professional. Mrs. Vance is in room 402. She was brought out of emergency surgery 3 hours ago. How is she? What happened? It was just abdominal pain, right? A nerve compression? Ethan's words tumbled out in a desperate, frantic rush, as if saying them fast enough could rewrite reality. The patient suffered a ruptured fallopian tube due to an ectopic pregnancy. The nurse said, reading directly from the monitor. She had over 1,000 milliliters of blood in her abdominal cavity by the time she reached the operating table. If she had arrived 10 minutes later, she would have suffered cardiac arrest from hypovolemic shock. Ethan's breath hitched in his throat. A cold, suffocating weight pressed down on his chest, making it impossible to draw air. 1,000 milliliters. She was bleeding out while he was sitting on the edge of Chloe's sofa, carefully massaging her ankle. She was losing her life while he was telling her to take 2 painkillers and turn on the exhaust fan so she wouldn't leave a smell. I need to see her, Ethan rasped, turning toward the hallway. I'm her husband. I'm her legal doctor. You are not her attending physician, Dr. Vance, the nurse said firmly. And Mrs. Vance explicitly signed a restriction order upon regaining consciousness. She requested no visitors from her immediate household. That's absurd. I'm her legal spouse. Ethan yelled, his composure completely shattering. He pushed past the desk and hurried down the corridor toward room 402. He reached the heavy oak door of room 402, his hand extending toward the silver handle. Before his fingers could touch the metal, an arm stretched out, blocking his path. With absolute, immovable force, Ethan looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Standing in front of the door was a man in his early 30s, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. He was broad-shouldered, tall, with sharp, refined features and dark, intelligent eyes that looked at Ethan with an intensity so cold it was almost lethal. Julian Mercer. Ethan recognized him immediately, though they had only met once years ago. Julian was a senior managing partner at one of the top corporate law firms in the city, and the man who had grown up in the very same orphan care center as Avery. They had been close as siblings, almost inseparable, until Julian went abroad for his master's degree 6 years ago. Get out of my way, Ethan snarled, trying to shove past him. This is between me and my wife. Julian didn't budge an inch. His grip on Ethan's forearm tightened slightly, hard as forged iron. She isn't your wife right now, Ethan, Julian said, his voice terrifyingly quiet, low, and smooth like silk covering razor wire. She's a patient who survived a near-fatal surgery while you were busy playing Doctor to a ballerina. Ethan's face went white, then flushed with red anger. You have no right to be here. You're an outsider. I am her legal next of kin. You were, Julian corrected calmly. He reached into his inner suit pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and held it in front of Ethan's eyes. It was a copy of the emergency medical power of attorney, signed by Avery in shaky, blood-stained handwriting right before she was wheeled into the operating room. Listed under primary health proxy, Julian Mercer. Listed under emergency family contact, Julian Mercer. Under the section for spousal notification, Avery had checked a single box. Do not notify. She called you, Ethan, Julian whispered, leaning in closer, his dark eyes locking onto Ethan's pale face. She called you while her internal organs were flooding with blood. You told her she was playing the victim because she's an orphan. Do you have any idea what those words meant to a woman who spent her entire life praying for someone to stay? Ethan felt as if he had been struck in the chest with a sledgehammer. He stumbled back half a step. I didn't know. She didn't tell me it was an ectopic pregnancy. She just said her stomach hurt. She didn't know either. Julian snapped, his quiet composure breaking for a fraction of a second, revealing a terrifying fury underneath. She thought she was having a miscarriage. She thought she was losing a baby, your baby. But you didn't listen long enough to hear her finish her sentence, did you? You were too busy running to your ex-girlfriend's beck and call. I was treating a patient, Ethan screamed, his voice cracking, desperate to hold onto the shield he had used for 3 years. Chloe's spine. Chloe's spine is fine, Julian interrupted coldly. I've already had my firm review her medical files at your hospital. She has a mild lumbar strain that requires basic rest and standard physical therapy. Nothing that required her head physical therapist to visit her apartment at midnight. Nothing that required him to spend 6 months holding her waist in private treatment rooms. Ethan froze. You looked into her files? I'm an attorney, Ethan. And as of 3 hours ago, I am Avery's legal representative, Julian said, stepping closer until he was towering over Ethan. If you try to step through that door, I will have hospital security remove you for harassment. If you cause a scene, I will file a formal complaint with the medical board regarding your unethical conduct with Chloe Vance, formerly Chloe Bennett, and your gross medical negligence regarding your wife. She's my wife. Ethan choked out, tears finally brimming in his eyes, a mixture of panic, shame, and humiliation. Avery, I know you can hear me, he shouted toward the closed door. Avery, please.
Let me in. I'm Soda.
I'm so.
Sorry?
The door remained shut. The heavy silence of the hospital corridor was his only answer. Julian looked down at Ethan as if he were nothing more than a stain on the
floor.
Go home, Ethan. Wash the orange blossom oil off your hands. You're going to need a clean pair of hands to sign the divorce papers tomorrow. Ethan didn't remember how he drove back to the apartment. The rain was falling heavily outside, sheets of water pounding against the windshield, but his mind was completely numb. When he unlocked the front door of their apartment, the silence that met him was suffocating. Usually, when he came home late, the hallway light would be left on a low, warm, amber glow. A thermos of warm soup or honey tea would be sitting on the kitchen counter with a small sticky note. Remember to drink this before bed. Your stomach gets upset when you sleep late. Tonight, the apartment was pitch black. Ethan stumbled inside without turning on the lights. He walked into the master bedroom, his eyes gradually adjusting to the dark. The bed was made with meticulous precision, but one side, Avery's side, was completely cold. He sat down on the edge of the mattress, his head in his hands. The scent of sweet orange blossom cologne still lingered on his shirt jacket. Suddenly, the scent made him feel violently sick. He yanked off the jacket and threw it onto the floor. His gaze fell upon the nightstand. The printed photo was still sitting there. In the dim light, he looked at it closely for the first time without the lens of his own self-justification. In the photo, he was leaning over Chloe on the therapy table. His hand wasn't placing a formal, anatomical grip on her pelvic bone. His fingers were flared open, gripping her soft waist, pulling her flesh against his chest. His posture wasn't that of a clinical professional applying targeted pressure. It was the posture of a man intoxicated by proximity, bending down to kiss a woman who was looking up at him with parted lips. It wasn't a bad camera angle. Mia hadn't distorted anything. It was an embrace. Plain, undeniable, and filthy. Ethan's breathing became shallow and ragged. He opened the nightstand drawer, searching for something, anything, to prove that he wasn't the monster Julian had accused him of being. His fingers brushed against the bottom drawer of Avery's vanity. He remembered what happened earlier that night. When Chloe had reached into the drawer, Avery had panicked. She had covered the drawer with her hand. Ethan pulled the drawer all the way open. Inside, beneath a stack of old notebooks, lay two items. The first was a white box of birth control pills. It was completely unopened, the seal intact. Next to it was a small paper bag from a pharmacy, dated 3 months ago, containing vitamins, prenatal vitamins. Ethan stared at them, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. She wasn't taking birth control. For 3 years, whenever he casually mentioned that he wasn't ready for children or that the timing wasn't right, Avery had quietly agreed. He had assumed she was taking the pill, but she hadn't been. She had wanted a baby with him so badly that she had secretly started taking prenatal vitamins, praying for a miracle. And the second item in the drawer was a long, folded piece of thermal paper. An ultrasound report, dated 3 days ago. Ethan opened the paper with shaking hands. The black and white image showed a faint, tiny dark circle lodged near a dark shadow labeled uterine scar tissue. At the bottom, printed in bold clinical text, diagnosis, suspected ectopic pregnancy / low implantation gestational sac.
Hi.
Risk of rupture. Immediate specialist consultation advised. Ethan fell to his knees on the hardwood floor, the paper fluttering in his
Hands.
3 days ago. 3 days ago, she had received this report. And 3 days ago, when she came home terrified, holding her lower abdomen, what had he said to her? You're staying up late editing videos. Your posture is terrible.
That's why. You're hurting.
You only play the victim when the pain becomes unbearable. It's exhausting, Avery. Make sure to turn on the exhaust fan when you're done. Don't leave a smell for others. A guttural, choked sob broke from Ethan's throat. He buried his face in his hands, collapsing against the side of the bed. He had killed his own child. He had nearly killed his wife. And he had done it all while convincing himself that he was a saint, a dedicated doctor, a compassionate friend. The front door suddenly opened with a click. Ethan jumped up, a sudden, desperate surge of hope igniting in his chest. Avery? He rushed out into the hallway. Standing in the entryway was not Avery. It was Chloe. She was holding a key, the spare key Ethan had given her 6 months ago, in case of emergencies during her physical recovery.
She was wearing a
delicate pastel coat, her hair slightly damp from the rain, looking pale and fragile. Ethan, she whimpered, taking a step toward him, limping slightly. You left the party so fast you scared me. I took an Uber over. Is Avery really in the hospital? Did she really have an ectopic pregnancy? Ethan stood in the dimly lit hallway, looking at the woman standing before him. For 2 years, whenever he looked at Chloe, he saw his youth. He saw his unspeakable first love, the girl who had left him to pursue her grand ballet dreams in Europe, The girl whose fragility made him feel needed, powerful, and indispensable. Now, looking at her, all he felt was a cold, suffocating revulsion. "How did you get in here?" Ethan asked, his voice hollow and terrifyingly quiet. Chloe blinked, taken aback by his tone.
I
used the key you gave me." "Ethan, what's wrong with you? Why are you looking at me like that?" "I came to check on you. If Avery is sick, I can help you explain to her that." "Get out," Ethan said. Chloe froze. "What?" "Get out of my house," Ethan repeated, his voice rising, a raw, jagged edge tearing through his words. "Take your key, take your shoes, and get the hell out of my home."
Ethan.
"How can you talk to me like this?" Chloe's eyes welled with tears, her posture instantly shifting into her familiar, defensive helplessness. "I didn't do anything wrong. She was the one taking birth control. She was the one who didn't tell you she was pregnant. Why are you blaming me?" "Because every single time she was bleeding, every single time she was hurting, I was with you," Ethan screamed, stepping toward her, his face contorted in agony and rage. "I chose you. Over my marriage, over my dignity, over my own
Child.
I let you make a fool out of my wife in her own home." He reached out, grabbed her purse, and yanked the spare key off her keychain, tearing the leather strap. "Ethan, you're hurting me," Chloe cried out, clutching her wrist. "Don't ever come back here," Ethan whispered, his hands trembling violently as he tossed the key into the trash bin by the door. "And don't ever call my phone again." "You're insane," Chloe yelled, her tears turning into sharp, bitter resentment. "You think you can just push me away now? You ruined my physical therapy routine. If my back isn't fully recovered for the season premiere next month, I'll report you to the hospital board. I'll tell everyone you used your position as head therapist to seduce me." Ethan stared at her, a bitter, lifeless smile forming on his lips. "Go ahead," he whispered. "Do whatever you want.
There's nothing left of me to
Destroy anyway." He slammed the door in her face. A week later, the morning sun filtered through the blinds of room 402, casting warm, golden stripes across the crisp, white hospital bed. Avery sat up, a soft knit cardigan draped over her shoulders. Her face was still, slightly pale, but the ghostly, hollow look in her eyes was gone. In its place was a quiet, motionless clarity. Julian sat in the chair beside her bed, peeling an apple with steady, practiced precision. He sliced a neat section and offered it to her on a small plate. "The doctor said your surgical incision is healing very well," Julian said
softly.
"You can be discharged tomorrow." "Thank you, Julian," Avery said, taking the piece of apple. She chewed slowly, her eyes looking out the window at the clear blue sky. "How are the arrangements going?" "Everything is set," Julian replied, pulling a thick blue folder from his briefcase. "Your former apartment, the one your parents left you, has been fully deep cleaned and renovated. All your personal belongings from Ethan's place were packed and moved yesterday by a professional moving crew while he was at work." "Did he try to stop them?" "He tried," Julian said calmly, his tone devoid of any emotion. "He stood in the hallway for 3 hours, trying to call your number. When he realized you had changed your number, he tried to follow the moving truck. My firm issued a formal cease and desist warning. If he approaches within 50 meters of your new residence, the police will pick him up immediately." Avery nodded slowly. She felt no satisfaction, no joy, and surprisingly no
Pain.
It was as if the surgical scalpel hadn't just removed the ectopic mass and her damaged fallopian tube, it had surgically excised every last nerve ending that tied her heart to Ethan Vance. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Mia, the physical therapy nurse, walked in carrying a small bundle of lilies. "Avery," Mia said softly, her face filled with worry and relief. She placed the flowers on the bedside table. "How are you feeling?"
Much better, Mia.
"Thank you." Avery smiled faintly. "Thank you for sending me that photo last week." Mia sighed, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner, Avery. We all saw how he was treating Chloe. It was
Disgusting.
everyone in the department knew, but because Ethan was just promoted to head therapist, no one dared to speak up." "What's happening at the hospital now?" Julian asked, his eyes narrowing.
Slightly.
Mia hesitated, looking between Avery and Julian. "The hospital administration opened an internal investigation 3 days ago. Someone submitted an anonymous dossier containing shift logs, CCTV footage from the private therapy suites, and billing records." Avery looked at Julian. Julian merely took another bite of his apple, his expression unbothered. And what did they find? Avery asked. Ethan was charging Chloe's private sessions under General Hospital administrative funds, Mia revealed, her voice dropping. He logged over 200 hours of emergency offsite care for her over the past 6 months, using hospital-grade equipment and specialized oils without department authorization. Plus, the board reviewed the CCTV footage from the therapy room. Mia looked down, her cheeks flushing with slight embarrassment. The posture in that photo was just the tip of the iceberg. There were multiple instances of clear physical boundary violations during work hours. The board suspended his medical license pending a full ethical review yesterday afternoon. Avery listened, her expression unreadable. Ethan had built his entire identity around being the saint of the physical therapy department, the brilliant practitioner who could solve cases no one else could touch. He had sacrificed his marriage, his wife, and his unborn child on the altar of his professional pride and his unfulfilled romantic fantasy. And now, both were burning to ashes. What about Chloe? Avery asked softly. Mia let out a cold laugh. Chloe tried to pull her usual victim act. She went to the hospital director's office, claiming Ethan had coerced her into those private sessions under the threat of sabotaging her rehabilitation.
But the
board produced text messages Ethan had saved, messages from her asking him to come to her apartment at 2 a.m., begging him to massage her legs. Mia shook her head. The dance company dropped her as the lead ballerina for the upcoming season premiere this morning. They said her reputation was a risk to the company's sponsorship. The door to the hospital room suddenly clicked open. Ethan stood in the doorway. He looked unrecognizable. In just 7 days, he had lost noticeable weight. His cheeks were sunken, his eyes bloodshot and dark with severe sleep deprivation. He was wearing an Uniron shirt, his posture bowed, completely stripped of the arrogant, composed aura he had worn for years. Avery, he breathed, his voice hoarse and broken. Julian stood up immediately, his tall frame instantly cutting off Ethan's line of sight to the bed. I warned you about approaching her, Ethan. Julian, please, Ethan begged, tears instantly filling his sunken eyes. He didn't look at Julian. He tried desperately to peek over Julian's shoulder at Avery. Just 5 minutes. Please, give me 5 minutes with my wife.
I'm
begging you. Avery looked at the broken man standing in the doorway. She remembered the young man who had stood beside her at the registrar's office 3 years ago, holding her hand, promising that he would give her the family she had lost as a child. She remembered how he had tied his sneakers back on at 11 p.m. on their wedding night to go to another woman's apartment. Julian, Avery said softly. It's okay. Let him speak. Julian looked at her for a second, seeing the absolute, unshakable calm in her
eyes.
He nodded, gesturing for Mia to step outside with him. 5 minutes, Julian said to Ethan, his voice like frost, as he walked past him into the hallway. The door clicked shut, leaving Ethan and Avery alone in the room. Ethan took a step toward the bed, his knees trembling so hard he almost collapsed. Avery, he whispered, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, worn paper bag. I brought you the red bean buns from the bakery near your old
house.
You used to love them when you were stressed. Avery looked at the bag. Ethan, she said quietly. I stopped eating those 2 years ago. They gave me heartburn. Ethan's hand froze in midair. He stood there holding the cold paper bag, looking completely lost. You never told me. I told you 4 times, Avery replied, her tone completely even, devoid of any anger, spite, or bitterness. Every time I mentioned it, you were looking at your phone, answering Chloe's messages about her lumbar stretch. Ethan swallowed hard, a painful lump forming in his throat. He pulled out the thick stack of papers Julian's firm had sent him that morning. The divorce settlement. I'm not signing this, Avery, Ethan said, his voice cracking as tears spilled over his hollow cheeks. I won't sign it. I know I made a terrible mistake. I know I was blind, arrogant, and cruel. But I love you. God help me. Avery, I love you. I didn't realize it until I walked into that empty house and saw your clothes gone. He fell to his knees beside her bed, reaching out desperately to grab her hand. Avery gently pulled her hand back, tucking it under the hospital blanket, out of his reach. You don't love me, Ethan, she said softly, looking down at him. You just miss having a safety net. Ethan sobbed, pressing his forehead against the edge of the mattress. No, that's not true. I'll resign from the hospital. I'll never see Chloe again.
I
Blocked her, Avery. I kicked her out of her house. I'll give up physical therapy. I'll take any job. I'll do anything you want. Just give me one more chance, please. Let me make it up to you. We can try for another baby.
Ethan.
The single word was spoken so softly, yet it hit Ethan like a physical blow.
He
Slowly raised his tear-stained face. Avery looked at him, her dark eyes clear and reflective, like a mirror showing him his own ugliest truths. Do you know why I didn't throw a tantrum when Chloe sent those Snapchats? She
asked.
Do you know why I didn't yell at you when you spent $3,000 buying her specialized stretch equipment? Or when you missed our anniversary dinner because her hamstrings were tight? Ethan shook his head numbly. Because I thought if I was quiet enough, gentle enough, and patient enough, you would eventually notice that I was standing right beside you, Avery said.
Softly.
I thought my silence was maturity, but you thought my silence was permission. She reached under her pillow and pulled out a clean, black pen, placing it on the bedside table beside the divorce papers. You didn't love Chloe either, Ethan, Avery continued, her voice echoing in the quiet room. You just loved the feeling of being her savior. You loved that she was broken and fragile because fixing her made you feel like a god.
And you
Hated me when I was sick because my real pain shattered your fantasy of being perfect. Ethan choked on a breath, his chest heaving violently. I nearly died in that operating room, Ethan, Avery said, her voice dropping to a whisper. When the anesthesia took over, my last thought wasn't that I was
scarred to die.
My last thought was relief. Relief that I would never have to sit on that couch again, waiting for the sound of your sneakers at 3 in the morning, smelling another woman's perfume on your collar. Ethan stared at her, his lips quivering, completely stripped of any remaining defense. Sign the papers, Ethan, Avery said, turning her head back toward the window, where the sun was shining brightly. Give me back the dignity you stole from me. For 3 years. That's the only medical service you can offer me now. Ethan looked at the black pen sitting on the nightstand. His fingers picked it up. His hands shook so violently, he could barely hold the barrel. He pulled the document toward him on his knees. On the final page, under the line marked defendant/spouse, his hand trembled over the paper for a long, agonizing minute. A tear dropped onto the white page, blurring the printed ink. Slowly, painfully, he signed his name, Ethan Vance. He left the pen on the table, pulled himself up using the edge of the bed, and looked at Avery one last time. She didn't turn her head. She was looking at the birds flying across the blue sky outside. Ethan turned and slowly walked out of the room. When the door clicked shut behind him, Ethan collapsed against the corridor wall, sliding down to the floor, pulling his knees to his chest, and wept like a abandoned child in the bright, unforgiving light of the hospital hallway. 2 months later, the high-end physical therapy clinic near the city center was quiet. Ethan sat behind a small laminate desk in a tiny, rented consultation room. It wasn't the head therapist office he had occupied at the prestigious medical center. It was a subcontracted space in a low-tier private rehab clinic. Following the hospital board's investigation, Ethan's senior medical license had been suspended for 2 years due to severe clinical ethics violations and improper resource allocation. The news had circulated quietly throughout the medical community. No top-tier hospital would hire him. His hair was unkempt, his eyes permanently ringed with dark circles. The door to his consultation room burst open. Chloe walked in, her face sharp, wearing heavy makeup that failed to hide her exhaustion. She was holding a legal letter in her hand. Ethan, she slammed the letter onto his desk. What is the meaning of this? Ethan didn't even look up from his desk log. What is what? My dance company just served me a contract termination notice. Chloe screamed, her voice shrill and trembling with rage. They cited unprofessional conduct and chronic injury misrepresentation. They said the medical reports you submitted on my behalf for the past 6 months were clinically exaggerated to excuse me from mandatory rehearsals. Ethan slowly raised his eyes. His gaze was completely flat, lifeless. They were exaggerated, Ethan said quietly. You didn't have severe lumbar instability, Chloe. You had minor muscle fatigue. You used my medical authority to dodge rehearsals you weren't prepared for, and I was stupid enough to sign my name to your lies. You bastard, Chloe yelled, lunging forward, slapping her palm against
the desk.
You ruined my career. I gave up my prime dancing years for you.
I
Came back to this country because of you. You came back because your European dance company dropped you for missing technique evaluations, Ethan said coldly, his voice devoid of any emotion. Julian's firm sent me your European medical records during the divorce discovery process. You were fired in Paris 2 years ago, Chloe. You didn't come back for me. You came back because you needed a licensed therapist to write you fake disability waivers so you could sign a contract here. Chloe froze, her face turning instantly ash white. You looked into that, she stammered. Julian looked into everything, Ethan said, a bitter, self-deprecating smile forming on his face. He laid out your entire life, and my entire life, on a legal table. Do you know what I saw, Chloe? I saw two toxic, selfish narcissists who used each other to feel special while destroying the only innocent person who ever genuinely cared about either of us. Ethan, please. Chloe's voice suddenly shifted, dropping into her familiar, pathetic whimpering tone. She took a step closer, reaching out to touch his shoulder. We only have each other now. My career is gone, your license is suspended, but we can start over. We can open a private wellness studio. Together, you're still the best therapist I know. Ethan pulled his shoulder away, stepping back from her as if she carried a contagious disease. Don't touch me, Ethan said softly. I look at you, Chloe, and all I smell is orange blossom oil mixed with the blood of my unborn child.
Get out of my
office. Chloe stared at him, her eyes widening with shock, realization, and finally,
pure atred.
You're a loser, Ethan Vance, she spat, her face twisting into something ugly and grotesque. You lost your promotion, you lost your reputation, and your wife left you for a man who makes 10 times your salary. You're nothing. She spun around on her high heels and stormed out of the clinic, slamming the glass door so hard it cracked down the center. Ethan sat back down in his worn office chair. He pulled out his phone. He opened his photos folder. There was only one photo left in his gallery, a picture taken 3 years ago on a sunny afternoon in a small park near their first apartment. Avery was sitting on a wooden bench, wearing a simple yellow sundress, holding a cup of cheap ice cream, laughing at something silly he had said. She was looking at the camera with eyes full of pure, unreserved, total trust. Ethan pressed his thumb against her face on the glass screen. A single tear rolled down his cheek, dropping silently onto the cold, dusty
desk.
1 year later, the grand auditorium of the City Cultural Center was packed with people.
The
annual Independent Media and Video Arts Awards ceremony was in full swing. Bright spotlights tracked across the polished stage, where a large LED screen displayed the nominees for Best Documentary Director of the Year. And the award goes to, the presenter announced, opening the gold envelope, Avery Miller for Unspoken Threads. Thunderous applause erupted throughout the auditorium. In the second row of the VIP section, Avery stood up. She was wearing an elegant, floor-length emerald green satin gown that highlighted her graceful posture and healthy, glowing skin. Her long hair was swept back in sophisticated waves, her eyes brilliant and full of life. Beside her, Julian stood up as well. He was wearing a tailored tuxedo, his dark eyes looking down at her with unfiltered pride and deep, unwavering affection. He reached out, gently took her hand, and kissed the back of her knuckles before stepping aside to let her walk toward the stage. Avery walked up the stairs, accepting the heavy crystal trophy from the presenter. She stepped up to the microphone, her calm, confident voice filling the vast hall. Thank you, she said, looking out at the crowd of hundreds. This documentary is about survivors of quiet trauma, people who spent years believing that pain was the price they had to pay for love. She paused, her gaze naturally finding Julian standing at the front of the stage, his eyes fixed on her. For a long time, I thought love was about enduring, Avery continued. A beautiful, genuine smile touching her lips. I thought it meant holding your breath in the dark, waiting for someone to notice you're suffocating.
But I
learned that real love doesn't demand your silence. Real love brings you into the light, holds your hand, and gives you the space to breathe. She raised the trophy slightly. To everyone who had the courage to walk away from the darkness, this is for you. The crowd rose to a standing ovation. Outside the cultural center, a cold autumn rain was falling. Ethan stood near the bus stop across the street, huddled inside a worn, faded, dark coat. He was holding a small plastic bag containing a cold convenience store sandwich, his dinner after finishing a 12-hour shift at a local community physical therapy clinic where he now worked for minimum wage assisting elderly patients with basic mobility exercises. He looked across the wide boulevard at the giant digital billboard hanging on the facade of the cultural center. The screen shifted, displaying a high-definition photograph of Avery standing on stage, holding her crystal award, glowing under the bright stage lights, flanked by Julian Mercer, who had his arm gently wrapped around her waist in a protective, quiet embrace. She looked radiant. She looked whole. She looked completely, utterly happy. And in her eyes, there was not a single trace of the man who was currently standing in the rain, freezing on the pavement across the street. Ethan stood there for a long time, the cold rain soaking through his thin shoes, pooling at his feet. He remembered the night he had tucked the blanket around her and told her, "I'll be back soon. I'll take you to get our courthouse wedding photos tomorrow morning." He had come back at 3 in the morning, smell of orange blossom oil on his clothes, believing she would always be sitting on the edge of the bed, waiting for him. Now, he was the one standing in the dark, watching her life shine like a star, light years away from his reach. Ethan pulled his coat collar tighter around his neck, turned his back on the glowing screen, and disappeared slowly into the dark, rainy night.